11 largemouth bass facts that will blow your mind. Starting with number 1, did you know there's actually 2 strains of largemouth bass? You got the northern strain and then the Florida strain. And the biggest difference between the two is how big these fish actually get. So if you live north of the Mason-Dixon line, you're most likely catching the northern strain. So they both grow around the same rate for year 1 to 3, but after year 3, the Florida strain takes off, can reach weights of up to 20 pounds plus, where the northern strain only gets about half that size, topping out around 10 pounds, sometimes a little bit more. So if you're freaking out or getting really bummed out because you see all these guys on social media posting up large 12, 14, 16, 18 pound bass, and you live north of the Mason-Dixon line, hey guys, you're keeping up, so don't get frustrated here. And really quick, how long does it actually take for these bass to get that large? So in order for a northern strain or southern strain to reach that 10 pound, that 20 pound mark, that's gonna be roughly a fish that is 8 years old. Largemouth bass generally only live to about 16 years old, and in fact, the northern strain of largemouth bass tended to live larger than the Florida strain. Believe it or not, largemouth bass have ears. Now, there's 3 different ways that largemouth bass detect their prey. You're gonna have that lateral line, that organ along the side of their body that detects a lot of vibrations. The swim bladder also has a similar effect. Essentially, the ears inside the bass consist of a small bones, and these bones are actually able to pick up on these subtle clicking sounds like grass shrimp and crayfish. And so you ever wonder why all these lures have all these rattles in them and all these clicks that are designed within them? Well, now you know. Did you know that largemouth bass can actually swim at 2.5 times their body length per second? So what that means is that 20-inch bass can actually swim around 12 miles per hour in short spurts. If you think of it that way, that's faster than any lure that you can retrieve. And do you actually know in 75 other countries, largemouth bass are actually considered an invasive species, which poses the question, why? Well, 1 is that they're kind of resistant to poor water quality, and number 2, they are voracious predators. We love them here in the US because they're an awesome game fish. In places like Japan, New Brunswick, Canada, and Guatemala, they don't, because they actually prey on the local fish that they hold near and dear to them. Speaking of appetite, how much food does a largemouth bass need to eat in order to grow 1 pound? Well, the answer to that is 10 pounds of forage per 1 pound of body weight. So if a bass eats 1,000 1-inch bluegill, it will only grow 1 pound. So if you're lucky enough to grab a 10 pounder, just think that fish had to eat 100 pounds of food in order to get that big. Man, that's awesome. Largemouth bass are actually pretty intelligent creatures. In fact, there's been studies done that show that a bass can actually distinguish a certain lure or bait after 1 encounter. I go to this place in southern Ohio and I read the forums all the time. There's guys like, oh yeah, it's fished out. Well, not exactly. So if you heard that there's a lake that's fished out, there actually might be a pretty good chance that it's not. It's just used to seeing the same baits and same lures time after time. It's sitting there probably like, oh yeah, I've seen that crankbait before. Oh, come here, son. That's called a jig. Yep, there goes the Texas rig right along the bottom. Ooh, spinnerbait. So the tip here is that in high pressured areas and places that people are like, oh yeah, that lake's fished out, try to broaden up your lure selection. Try to pick something you usually don't fish with, or something that you know that on that particular body of water others don't fish with as well. And sometimes apps will give you an idea of what those are. Come on now, if you learned something new, hit that like button. Let's get this video out so more people are moving on. You ever wonder why a largemouth bass is so slimy? Well, it's actually a protective covering of mucus that helps protect that bass from parasites and infections. So something to keep in mind is kind of on you as the angler. Before you pick up a fish, it's kind of a good idea to get your hands wet so you don't remove that slime from that bass. I know when I catch them, especially the small ones, say, hey man, go get bigger. And part of that's actually on me by protecting and handling those bass appropriately. Bass actually grow the fastest in water that is highly oxygenated. One of the main reasons that bass are often found in shallow water. And so water gets oxygenated in 2 different ways. One, whenever the air comes in contact with the water, which is usually on surface level. It's also the byproduct of aquatic plants. If you're in an area where there's a lot of healthy green plants or algae below the water, that is a good sign there's probably some healthy bass in there. Do you know that bass can actually live outside of the water for around 12 to 13 minutes, which is plenty of time for you to get that selfie, to weigh it, to measure it, to kiss it, whatever you do. I actually saw a video recently where a guy poured his beer down the bass's mouth and then decided to chug it. Don't recommend that. Disgusting. Have you ever wondered how old a bass is? Here's a general rule of thumb, a guide to help you determine, based on the length, how old that bass actually is. So if you're catching a 4 to 12 inch bass, that bass is probably 1 to 2 years old. Catch a bass around the 16 inch mark, that bass is around 3 to 4 years old. And if you catch a bass that is north of 16 inches long, that bass is likely 4 years or older. Now, I always say, if you want to catch bass and catch them more often and catch them in bigger sizes, you need to become an expert on the largemouth bass and its behaviors, which is why I created this other video called 9 Things Largemouth Bass Hate, and you can use what they hate to your advantage to catch more fish. Hey guys, thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.